Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Hira Mustafa and these are the headlines. The US has announced sanctions on Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government for human rights violations. It targeted 8 prisons run by al-Assad's intelligence apparatus and 5 senior officials who oversee them. The Treasury Department also imposed sanctions on Syrian armed group Ahrar al-Sharqiya for abuses against civilians. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has proposed permanent deployment of Russian troops along the border with Azerbaijan amid rising tensions. This comes as Baku said Armenian forces have violated the ceasefire deal and launched attacks in the Kalbahar region. Meanwhile, the US has condemned the recent escalation and urged both countries to uphold their ceasefire commitments. China says provocative US actions in the South China Sea are disturbing the peace and stability of the region. This comes after the US Navy destroyer Ben Fold sailed through the Taiwan Straits on Wednesday. The Chinese People's Liberation Army said it tracked and monitored the movements of the US warship. Brazil has reported more than 1,300 COVID-19 deaths for the second day in a row. The Latin American state also logged more than 48,000 new cases in the past 24 hours. Meanwhile, cases and deaths in Pakistan are rising as nearly 4,500 tested positive and 76 lost their lives. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.1 million lives and infected over 195 million people. On day 6 of the Tokyo Olympics, China lead the medal standings with 14 goals after winning the women's 200-meter butterfly. Japan and the US are tied at 13 gold medals each, while the US lead the overall tally with 37 and China trail with 29. Well, those were the headlines. News in detail coming after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now the news in detail. The US has announced sanctions on Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's government for human rights violations. It also targeted 8 prisons run by al-Assad's intelligence apparatus and 5 senior officials who oversee them. The Treasury Department said the Assad regime has tortured at least 14,000 prisoners to death. In a statement, it said more than 130,000 people reportedly remain missing or arbitrarily detained. The Treasury also imposed sanctions on the Syrian armed group Ahrar al-Sharqiya for abuses against civilians. In a separate statement, the Treasury announced curbs on a Turkey-based al-Qaeda financial facilitator. The department said it also targeted one Syria-based terrorist fundraiser and recruiter. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the curbs show the U.S. commitment to human rights and accountability for abuse against Syrians. For more on this, we have with us Dr. Arnaud Develay, a political analyst from Damascus. Sir, thank you for your time. Dr. Arnaud Develay, the U.S. has sanctioned the Syrian officials, saying the curbs will promote accountability for abuses committed against the Syrian people. Do you think the Syrian government is committing human rights crime against its own people?
Well, one has to keep in mind that there's been a systematic campaign to demonize the legitimate Syrian government for years now. The so-called Caesar file, which actually paved the way for the passing of this U.S. law, domestic U.S. law, I should add, allowing for sanctions against any countries who might engage in some kind of transaction with the Syrian government, and so on a matter of humanitarian ground as well, has always been debunked as an operation led by the humanitarian NGO complex, i.e. in this case Amnesty International. This is something that is savagely organized by the neoconservative and liberal interventionist crowd in Washington, and they've been at it, using media, NGO complex, and by manipulating as well the United Nations agencies, such as the Organization for the Control of Chemical Weapons. So this is nothing new, and in this instance, it's just yet another example of this attrition war, hybrid warfare that is being waged, not as much on the Syrian government and or Syrian officials, but against the Syrian people.
Right. Dr. Devile, what do Washington want to gain with the latest curbs, as it has already sanctioned the Syrian government?
Well, the objective is always stated as such, basically that by putting pressure on the Syrian officials and Syrian organs of the state, they are trying to basically prevent the state, the Syrian state, from attending to its citizens' needs. And the hope is that over the long run, public opinion in Syria, but also in other countries where those sanction regimes are being imposed, the population will turn against their elected officials. And I want to remind our viewers that we've had a presidential election a couple of months ago, which was a ringing endorsement by the Syrian people of the way President Bashar al-Assad has handled and presided over the waging of the war of liberation from terrorism. So those attempts to try to drive a wedge between Syrian people, regular people, and its leadership will fail ultimately. So in the end, as a former UK ambassador to Syria, Peter Ford, said, we are really witnessing nothing more than a spiteful policy which aims at cruelly rendering ordinary Syrians' lives miserable and nothing else.
Dr. Devile, the Biden administration is pulling all American troops out of Afghanistan and Iraq, but the U.S. military operation in Syria has seen no changes. Why do the U.S. want to linger on in its presence in Syria?
As for your question on Syria, the Syria group that has been specially appointed upon President Biden's inauguration have openly claimed that their role is to basically remain in Syria for the oil as a means of pressure to prevent any kind of reconstruction and to put pressure on Syrian government to basically obtain through economic sanction what they could not obtain through the means of terrorism. So Syria has won the war militarily, and now comes a new chapter. It's a new chapter which bears on economic sanctions, on diplomatic pressure, and basically on trying to prevent any reconstruction to take place. But by no means the situation is that different between Syria and Iraq, or between Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. I would say that specifically to Syria and Iraq, the main things for the Americans is to try to contain what they call Iranian influence. They believe that, and in order to protect their, proxy state, the Israeli state, in the region, they need to maintain a presence in the region to prevent what they perceive as Iranian influence filling the vacuum if they were to leave. So there's no way the Americans are going to be leaving the regions anytime soon. If anything, they are reactivating, as we speak, terrorist cells. They are trying to break the lack of porosity of the border between Iraq and Syria, which has early on in the last decade, allowed them to wreak havoc, essentially, by facilitating the ins and outs of terrorists under their care and training and control, should I say.
Dr. Arnaud Devile, thank you for speaking to Indus News. And now we're moving on. Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has proposed permanent deployment of Russian troops along the border with Azerbaijan amid rising tensions. This comes as Baku said Armenian forces have violated the ceasefire deal and launched attacks in the Kalbahar region. The Azeri Defense Ministry said Armenian forces fired rifles and hand grenades at positions in Zaylik village. In a statement, Baku says its armed forces retaliated and suppressed the shelling. Meanwhile, the U.S. State Department has condemned the recent clashes between Armenia and Azerbaijan. State Department spokesperson Ned Price urged the countries to uphold their ceasefire commitments. The Arab coalition says it has destroyed missiles and drones launched by Houthis towards Saudi Arabia. The coalition said Yemeni rebels launched 2 ballistic missiles and 1 explosive-laden drone towards Jazan city. The coalition said it is taking operational measures to protect civilians from terrorist attacks. The development comes just a day after the coalition intercepted 4 Houthi missiles and 2 drones. Meanwhile, U.S. envoy for Yemen, Tim Lennerking, met with his UN counterpart Muin Sharaim. Lennerking voiced concern about Houthis' Marib offensive in Yemen. In a tweet, Washington said both underscored the need for a nationwide ceasefire and renewed political talks. China says provocative U.S. actions in the South China Sea are disturbing the peace and stability of the region. This comes after U.S. Navy destroyer Ben Fold sailed through the Taiwan Straits on Wednesday. The Chinese People's Liberation Army said it tracked and monitored the movements of the U.S. warship. Spokesperson Shi Ji said the Eastern Theater Command is ready to respond to any threats. Earlier, China's new ambassador to the U.S. said the bilateral ties are at a critical juncture. Chenggang urged against shuttling down the door to better ties between the two states. The Taliban claimed to have killed an Afghan army colonel in an attack in Kabul's Bagrami district. In a tweet, the group's spokesperson said they targeted Colonel Asif in the Golebati area. The spokesperson said the group also killed 9 Afghan security personnel in Nangarhar. He said the Taliban destroyed a military checkpoint in the Khogyani district of the province. Meanwhile, the Afghan army says it has killed 37 fighters, including 2 senior commanders. It said 35 Taliban have also been injured in an airstrike along the Georgian-Saraipur highway. Pakistan says it cannot be held responsible for the actions of the Taliban following the withdrawal of the U.S. and its allies. During an interaction with the Afghan media, Prime Minister Imran Khan said his government is not a spokesperson for the Taliban. Prime Minister Imran Khan reiterated that Pakistan wants peace in Afghanistan. He said it's up to the Afghans to choose between a U.S.-backed military solution or a political settlement. The Prime Minister stressed that Pakistan cannot monitor the movement of 3 million Afghan refugees. He said, however, Pakistan is trying its best and has completed 90% of the border fencing between Pakistan and Afghanistan. Khan stressed that Afghanistan cannot be controlled from the outside and Pakistan has no favorites there. Pakistan's Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi will meet the top Bahraini leadership today in Manama. Qureshi is on a 2-day official visit to the country. The top Pakistani diplomat will also hold a meeting with his Bahraini counterpart today. Pakistan's Foreign Office says ways to boost bilateral cooperation and matters of mutual interest will be discussed. He will also speak at a ceremony organized by the Pakistani business community in Bahrain. Qureshi will share Prime Minister Imran Khan's economic agenda and praise the contribution of expat Pakistanis. For more on this, we are joined by Manahil Ahmed, our correspondent from Islamabad. Manahil, can you please share with us who will Shah Mahmood Qureshi meet today and what other activities are scheduled for the Foreign Minister?
Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi arrived in Bahrain yesterday for a 2-day official visit where he was welcomed by his Bahrain counterpart. He met with the Deputy Prime Minister of Bahrain as well as with the Foreign Minister of Bahrain, where the two discussed issues of mutual interest, bilateral cooperation, regional and international issues. The matter of Kashmir was brought up, and the atrocities committed by Indian forces in occupied Kashmir was highlighted by the Pakistani foreign minister. He also highlighted the efforts made by Pakistan to support a peaceful negotiation in Afghanistan and to help Afghanistan achieve peace and stability. Further, the foreign minister also addressed the Joint Ministerial Commission in Bahrain, where he did highlight Pakistan's focus from a geopolitical to a geo-economic phase, where he did invite Bahrain to come and invest in Pakistan and participate in projects such as the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor. The two leaders did agree that there needs to be a deepened cooperation in various fields such as investment, trade, and energy. Today, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi is expected to meet the Interior Minister of Bahrain as well as the Crown Prince and the King of Bahrain. In these meetings, regional issues are expected to be discussed: regional, international, bilateral issues of how to increase trade, people-to-people linkages, cultural exchanges, education, health, and various diverse fields of there's tremendous there's tremendous opportunity to increase cooperation between the two countries, and this meeting is a significant meeting to see a new relationship and a stronger relationship develop between Bahrain and Pakistan.
Right. Manahil, Pakistan's diplomats and the Prime Minister have been very busy lately. What were the objectives and focus of this visit?
Well, you see, there's a lot of regional issues going on following the withdrawal of the U.S. troops from Afghanistan. And as Prime Minister Imran Khan has repeatedly said to multiple international media outlets and to his counterparts of different countries, that Pakistan supports a peaceful resolution to the Afghan conflict. He has always reaffirmed its commitment to Afghanistan, and he has always stated that there is no military solution to Afghanistan. He's always highlighted how Pakistan was one of the top countries who was mostly affected by the war on terror and by the war that was happening in Afghanistan, and he is more than ever committed to resolve the Afghan crisis. So I believe that these meetings that are being taken place, be it the foreign minister visiting Bahrain, he earlier visited Azerbaijan, and the Prime Minister's visit to Saudi Arabia early in May, and all these bilateral meetings that are being held, it is for all the regional partners to come on the same page and to really facilitate the Afghan issue and to facilitate Afghanistan towards a peaceful and stable country. Pakistan is hosting millions of Afghan refugees, and Pakistan has always helped in developmental projects and medical projects in Afghanistan, and Prime Minister Imran Khan has said that Pakistan is really not in the condition to be hosting more Afghan refugees, and it is in Pakistan's favor, and it is in Pakistan's concern to facilitate the Afghan peace process, as we will benefit, as Pakistan will benefit from a peaceful and stable Afghanistan. So I believe these meetings that are being held following Dr. Moeed Yusuf's visit to the US, these meetings that are being held, it is to improve regional connectivity, to build more trust, and to really help facilitate Afghanistan into this new phase, and following the US withdrawal. So these meetings are of key importance for this region.
Right. Manahil, Pakistan's National Security Advisor Moeed Yusuf is in the US along with the chief of Pakistan's intelligence agency. What do we know about the agenda and tentative meetings expected during that visit?
Yes, Pakistan's National Security Advisor, Dr. Moeed Yusuf, is on a visit to US, where he will meet his counterpart Jake Sullivan, where bilateral issues will be discussed. He will also meet with US legislators, think tanks over there, and the Pakistani community, and try to build a deeper relationship and a deeper cooperation between the United States and the Pakistan. The US and Pakistan has a really historic and long-standing relationship. Pakistan was one of the few countries that supported the US in its its war on terror, and it has been a really close ally ever since. Recently, Pakistan and the U.S. relationship was in the highlights due to certain statements that and certain concerns that were raised by the Prime Minister Imran Khan following multiple statements, be it President Joe Biden not calling the Prime Minister or him asking him to choose between China and US, also with Pakistan denying to give any air base to the US military. So, following all these statements and multiple events that took place, this meeting of Moeed Yusuf with his US counterpart is going to be of extremely, extremely importance. And he also met with him earlier a few months ago. And I believe this is going to be a follow-up meeting where they will discuss the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, how to facilitate the Afghan peace process, how to bring peace and stability in that region, and how Pakistan will be playing an important role in facilitating the Afghans. Dr. Moeed Yusuf, the Prime Minister of Imran Khan, the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, they have always reaffirmed their commitment towards this process, and they have said that Pakistan stands for a peaceful and stable Afghanistan. So this meeting will be of extreme importance, where regional dynamics will be discussed and regional peace will be discussed. Pakistan has lost trillions and billions of dollars, and thousands of people have given their lives for this war on terror, which Pakistan stood by with America. So I think this meeting will be a step forward for the U.S. and Pakistani relationship, and like last time, hopefully it will be of a positive outcome.
Manail Ahmed, thank you for updating us. And now we're moving on. Israeli forces have detained 11 Palestinians, including a minor, from various parts of the West Bank. This comes just a day after the Israeli army killed a 12-year-old Palestinian boy in the Beit Umar town in Hebron city. The Palestinian Health Ministry said Mohammed al-Alami was shot in the chest while traveling in a car with his father. Al-Alami is the third young Palestinian to die of wounds sustained by Israeli fire in days. Earlier, the Israeli military injured at least 100 people in a clampdown on a protest against the killing of a 49-year-old Palestinian. Palestinian media said the occupying forces fired live bullets, rubber-coated steel bullets, as well as tear gas. More news stories coming up after the short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Brazil has reported more than 1,300 COVID-19 deaths for the second day in a row. The Latin American state also logged more than 48,000 new cases in the past 24 hours. Globally, the virus has claimed more than 4.1 million lives and infected over 195 million people. More in this report.
The coronavirus pandemic continues to inflict a devastating toll. As the Delta variant sweeps through the world, the Pan American Health Organization said Argentina, Colombia, Cuba, Ecuador, and Paraguay have some of the world's highest weekly death rates. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with World Health Organization's chief and reiterated support for the probe into the origins of the virus. In New York, authorities say starting from Labor Day, vaccination will be mandatory for state employees.
So in New York and our state hospitals, all patient-facing healthcare workers must get vaccinated. There will be no testing option for patient-facing healthcare workers. That is a point of contact that could be a serious spreading event. And we want to make sure that those healthcare workers are vaccinated.
Protesters placed body bags outside Facebook's headquarters to call it out for allowing the spread of misinformation about the vaccines. Meanwhile, in the Turkish city of Diyarbakir, authorities beg citizens to get vaccinated as the new wave in the east keeps surging. Over in the United Kingdom, opposition parties say opening borders for the United States and Europe without quarantine can import new COVID variants. France says that it will implement the use of passes to access public places by the 9th of August if the Constitutional Council approves the contested bill.
The Constitutional Council has stated that it will issue its decision on the Health Pass Bill on August 5th. The law will then be enacted afterwards, and we plan to have it take effect on August 9th. It's on this date that the extension of the Health Pass would take effect, and let me remind you, there will be a period of adjustment and tolerance of education and help for those concerned.
Cuba says Iran is set to start producing the island's homegrown COVID-19 vaccines on an industrial scale. The Yemeni government has put health facilities and workers on high alert as the country braces for a third wave. A new study, not yet peer-reviewed, shows that the efficacy of Pfizer's vaccine fell from 96% to 84% over 6 months. Meanwhile, Tokyo Olympics organizers have reported 24 new cases among participants, including 3 athletes.
In Pakistan, COVID-19 has claimed 76 lives overnight, the country's highest number since June 10th. The health ministry says the death toll has reached 23,209. The ministry has registered nearly 4,500 infections in the past 24 hours. The caseload has exceeded 1,020,000. Meanwhile, more than 937,000 people have recovered. The ministry says there are over 59,000 active cases, of which more than 3,000 are critical. Meanwhile, over 27.8 million vaccine doses have been administered so far across the country. In India, rape victim blaming by a ruling BJP leader has sparked outrage over social media and among human rights activists. 2 girls were gang raped on Bana Olim beach south of Goa's capital on Sunday. Chief Minister of Goa State Pramod Sawant asked parents to be more responsible. Speaking in the parliament, he said parents need to introspect on why their children were on the beach late at night. Sawant said the responsibility cannot be put on the government and police. Russia says it is concerned over what it called the activity of U.S. Special Services on its territory. A Kremlin spokesperson says it has been evident for a long time and it's still ongoing. Spokesperson Dmitry Peskov reiterated that Moscow is not interfering in the electoral processes in America or any other country. Peskov said numerous investigations in the U.S. confirmed that Russia never interfered in polls. He was responding to President Joe Biden's statement that Russia is trying to meddle in the upcoming 2022 interim U.S. elections. 3 persons has died in a forest fire that is burning for a second day in southern Turkey. Hot weather and strong winds have helped the fire spread around the town of Manavgat and nearby villages in Antalya. Agriculture Minister Bekir Pakdemirli said authorities have evacuated 18 villages and districts in Antalya province, while 16 villages in the neighboring Adana and Mersin have also been evacuated. The country's efforts to bring 10 ongoing fires under control are continuing. More than 1,800 personnel, 3 planes and 29 helicopters are deployed to fight the blazes. Turkish prosecutors also launched an investigation to determine the cause of the fire. In Lebanon, a volunteer firefighter has died in the blaze that broke out in northern Akkar Governorate's Kubayat area. In a tweet, Lebanese Red Crescent said it is transporting a number of injured to the hospitals. The humanitarian movement said it has also been evacuating vulnerable communities. Raging wildfires have burned large swathes of pine forests in the mountainous north. Local authorities said the high wind speed is preventing the flames from being extinguished. Bangladesh has evacuated 10,000 Rohingya from refugee camps on the Myanmar border. Officials said they took this step after monsoon landslides and flash floods killed at least 14 people. Officials say the refugees were relocated from hilly slopes around the Balukhali camp in Cox's Bazar. About 7,000 local people outside the camps have also been moved to safety. Over 850,000 Rohingya refugees are packed into 34 camps in the Cox's Bazar. The area has received over 27 centimeters of rain since Monday. The UN Refugee Agency said 2,500 shelters housing 12,000 Rohingya have been affected by the floods. Bangladesh Meteorological Department has predicted more torrential rains. An 8.2 magnitude earthquake that struck the coast of Alaska triggered a tsunami watch in Hawaii. These threats were later revised down after the U.S. tsunami warning system deemed they had passed. The U.S. Geological Service said the quake struck at a depth of 46.7 kilometers. Two other earthquakes with preliminary magnitudes of 6.2 and 5.6 occurred in the same area within a half hour. The Pacific Tsunami Warning Center says the potential threat to Guam and American Samoa is still under investigation. In Brazil, a cold wave in the southern state of Rio Grande do Sul has brought snow and cold rains to at least 13 cities. There were snowfalls in cities including São Francisco de Paula, Gramado, Carlos Barbosa, and Baja. The unusual weather phenomenon is related to a large polar air mass that entered during the last few hours. Tourists and locals used the opportunity to take pictures and play in São Francisco de Paula. The temperature there is expected to reach 2 degrees centigrade. Paraguay has seized more than 3,400 kilos of cocaine near the capital city of Asunción. Police have called it the country's biggest ever drug bust. Officials say the cocaine was being stashed in a load of sugar for international shipment. National Police Commander Luis Arias told reporters that the illegal stimulant was found in a warehouse. The bust exceeded the previous record in Paraguay when 2,900 kilograms of cocaine were seized in October 2020. That cargo had been hidden in the bags of charcoal. And now it's time to take a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. European stocks have inched higher as investors digested a fresh round of major corporate earnings. They are also inspecting the impact of the U.S. Federal Reserve's reiteration of its dovish policy stance. London's FTSE has gained the most so far, inching close to 1%. Frankfurt's DAX and the pan-European stock 600 have edged up marginally. The CAC 40 in Paris and Italy's FTSE MIB have added over 0.5%. Earlier Asian stocks rose with Hong Kong's Hang Seng jumping over 3%, while mainland Chinese stocks added nearly 1.5%. On day 6 of the Tokyo Olympics, China lead the medal standings with 14 golds after winning the women's 200-meter butterfly. Japan and the US are tied at 13 gold medals each, while the US lead the overall tally with 37 and China trail with 29. Today, medals are up for grabs in gymnastics, shooting and canoeing. Fencing, judo and swimming are also being rewarded on day 6. Earlier, Caleb Dressel dominated the men's 100-meter freestyle swimming, setting up an Olympic record. In the inaugural men's 800-meter freestyle, Team USA's Robert Fenke came from behind to clinch gold. China won the women's 800 meters freestyle relay, where all medalists beat the world record. Meanwhile, America's superwoman gymnast Simone Biles, who was almost destined for gold, withdrew. Her exit has raised concerns over the mental health challenges faced by athletes under the pressure of performing at the Olympics. For the weather updates, we have Nala Shuja with us.
Thank you. We're going to start off with Abu Dhabi, where the weather is expected to be extremely hot, with temperatures rising to 43 degrees Celsius. While in Amsterdam, the weather is partially cloudy and anticipated temperatures are at 19 degrees Celsius. If we head to Ankara, the weather is sunny with temperatures at around 33 degrees Celsius. Moving down under to Auckland, the temperature is chilly at 16 degrees Celsius with some clouds overhead. Now, if you are traveling to Bangkok, there will be cloudy weather weather with temperatures around 32 degrees Celsius. In Beijing, clouds are veiling the sun with temperatures at 27 degrees Celsius, while Beirut will be experiencing some sunny weather with temperatures at 32 degrees Celsius. Berliners will be experiencing temperatures at 23 degrees Celsius with some clouds making the weather more pleasant. Now heading to Cairo, the sun will be out with temperatures around 38 degrees Celsius. Down under in Canberra, the temperatures are at 13 degrees Celsius with the sun overhead. In Islamabad, temperatures are at 31 degrees Celsius, accompanied by some thunderstorms, while in Jakarta, the temperatures are steady at 33 degrees Celsius with partial sun in the forecast. That's all for now. Back to you.
Thank you, Nala. That's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.